The atmosphere inside the staff bar at the front, known officially as Station 9, was a deceptive veneer of normalcy overlaid upon a foundation of lethal ingenuity. It was an evening in 1943, and the air was likely thick with tobacco smoke and the low hum of conversation among men who spent their days inventing ungentlemanly ways to kill Nazis. In this setting, Douglas Everett moved with the casual confidence of a man among friends, ordering drinks and sharing jokes. Yet, concealed beneath the heavy fabric of his jacket sleeve, Everett carried 26 ounces of compressed, mechanical death. He was a scientist, not a commando, but on this night, he was the primary test subject for a device that promised to revolutionize the dark art of assassination. As the laughter rose and the clinking of glassware provided a subtle acoustic mask, Everett maneuvered his arm. He did not draw a weapon in any conventional sense. He simply allowed gravity and a precise muscular motion to align the device. Without breaking the rhythm of the social gathering, he fired a single .32 caliber round into a sandbag positioned nearby. The result was not a thunderous crack, but a sound quieter than a finger snap, a dull thud that was instantly swallowed by the ambient noise of the room. He glanced around. Not a head had turned, not a conversation had paused. No one had noticed that a firearm had been discharged within arm's reach of them. Everett had just demonstrated the terrifying efficacy of the sleeve gun, proving that British engineers had solved the ultimate paradox of covert operations. How to eliminate a target in a crowded room while standing right next to them, and simply walk away as if nothing had happened. To understand the magnitude of this achievement, one must look back at the bleak strategic landscape facing British intelligence in the early years of the war. By 1940 and 1941, the Special Operations executives so faced a brutal reality in occupied Europe. Their mission was to set Europe ablaze, but the fire needed to be ignited with precision. Operatives were tasked with eliminating high-value targets, Gestapo officers, traitorous collaborators, and key informants who threatened to dismantle resistance networks. These were not battlefield kills. They were intimate acts of violence performed in train stations, cafes, and city streets. The standard tools of the trade were failing. A knife required the operative to be within grappling distance, a chaotic intimacy that left the attacker covered in blood and vulnerable to counterattack. Garrots were silent but slow and required a strength and positioning that wasn't always available. Conventional pistols, even small caliber ones, were catastrophic in their loudness. A single shot would freeze a crowd, summon patrols, and make escape nearly impossible. The so needed a ghost weapon, something that bridged the gap between the silence of a blade and the lethality of a bullet. The first major stride toward this goal was the WWII, another brainchild of Station 9. This bolt-integral suppressor pistol was a marvel of engineering, reducing the report of a gunshot to around 73 decibels, roughly the sound of a car door closing down the street. It used a system of ported barrels and rubber wipes, literal discs of rubber that the bullet had to punch through to trap the expanding gases that create the noise of a gunshot. The WWII was effective, claiming documented kills in Denmark, Norway, and France. However, it had a fatal flaw in the context of high-risk urban infiltration. It looked like a weapon. It was a 12-inch tube weighing over 2 pounds. While it could be hidden under a coat, it could not survive a pat-down search. If a German sentry felt the hard outline of the WWII, the operative was dead. Furthermore, drawing the WWII took time. It required 2 hands to operate effectively, one to hold the grip, one to work the bolt. In the split-second tension of a street check or a sudden confrontation, that time was a luxury an agent did not have. The requirement that filtered down to Major Hugh Quentin, Elaine Reeves, at Station 9, was almost impossible in its constraints. Intelligence demanded a weapon that could pass a physical search, deploy instantly without visible movement, kill reliably, and vanish immediately after use. Reeves, a prolific inventor who would go on to design the Wellbike and the Wellman submarine, approached the problem not just as a gunsmith, but as an engineer of concealment. He realized that the form factor of a pistol, the grip, the trigger guard, the barrel, was the liability. To make a gun invisible, one had to remove everything that made it look like a gun. He began developing the device formally catalogued as item number 254, the sleeve gun. His design philosophy was radical. He stripped the firearm down to its absolute kinematic essentials, creating a tube that resembled a flashlight or a mechanic's tool rather than a lethal weapon. Reeves began by adapting the proven suppression technology of the WWII. The physics of silencing a firearm involves managing the violent expansion of hot gas that propels the bullet. The sleeve gun utilized a ported barrel that bled these gases off into an expansion chamber surrounding the rifling, slowing their exit. At the muzzle, the bullet passed through rubber and leather wipes, which sealed the aperture behind the projectile, trapping the remaining noise. This system was incredibly effective, but the wipes degraded with every shot, losing their effectiveness after about 15 rounds. However, Reeves understood the operational reality of his An assassin did not need to fight a sustained gun battle. They needed one shot, perhaps two. The sleeve gun was designed as a disposable asset, a fire-and-forget system where longevity was sacrificed for absolute silence and concealability. The physical architecture of the weapon was a masterclass in minimalism. The Mark I prototype was chambered in .22 long rifle, a choice likely driven by the ease of suppressing the smaller cartridge. However, the .22 round lacked the hydrostatic shock and stopping power necessary for a guaranteed one-shot kill, especially if the bullet had to pass through heavy winter clothing before entering the target. Furthermore, the Mark I had a dangerous design flaw. The trigger mechanism was housed in a separate tube attached to the main body, making it bulky and, according to post-war analysis, prone to accidental discharge. The idea of an agent shooting themselves in the arm while simply walking down the street was a risk the SO could not accept. Fewer than 50 of these initial units were made before Reeves went back to the drawing board. The Mark II sleeve gun was the refinement that transformed a dangerous experiment into a professional tool. Reeves upsized the caliber 2.32 ACP 7.65 x 17 mm Browning. This was the standard police caliber of the era. Offering a crucial balance, it was powerful enough to penetrate the torso and damage vital organs. Yet the cartridge's velocity was naturally subsonic, or easily kept subsonic. Avoiding the supersonic crack that no suppressor can eliminate, the Mark II was a single steel tube, 8.75 inches long, and 1.25 inches in diameter. Gone were the protruding triggers and guards. In their place was a knurled sliding switch near the muzzle. To fire, the operator had to perform a deliberate two-stage motion, push the switch forward, then pull it backward. This biomechanical safety prevented the gun from going off if the agent bumped their arm against a wall, but allowed for firing in a fraction of a second when intended. The true genius of the sleeve gun, however, lay not in how it fired, but in how it was carried. Reeves integrated a lanyard hole at the rear of the suppressor tube. An elastic shock cord was threaded through this hole and routed up the operative's sleeve to a harness on the shoulder or back. In the carry position, the weapon sat high up the forearm, near the elbow, completely invisible under the drape of a jacket or coat. When the moment to strike arrived, the agent would let gravity or a subtle shake of the arm drop the tube into their palm. The cylindrical shape meant it wouldn't snag on the cuff. The operator would then press the muzzle directly against the target, the contact shot being the intended method of use. The concave face of the muzzle was designed to press flush against the victim's body, which not only ensured accuracy but also helped seal the sound of the shot against the target's clothing. After the trigger was slipped and the round discharged, the agent simply opened their hand. The tension of the elastic cord would instantly whip the weapon back up the sleeve. This retraction mechanism solved the most dangerous part of an assassination, the aftermath. In a conventional shooting, the killer is left holding a smoking gun, or must be seen dropping it. With the sleeve gun, the weapon vanished. The spent casing remained trapped inside the breech, so no brass was left clattering on the pavement. No powder burns would be found on the agent's hands. Security forces arriving seconds later would find a victim collapsing, a confused crowd, and a man standing nearby with empty hands, looking just as shocked as everyone else. It was the engineering of total deniability. The production of these weapons was shrouded in the deepest secrecy. Birmingham Small Arms Company BSA is believed to have manufactured them, but likely in isolated workshops separate from the main production lines of Lee Enfield rifles and Sten guns. The weapons were completely sanitized. There were no Made in England stamps, no broad arrow acceptance marks, no manufacturer logos. Only a serial number and obscure inspection proofs were stamped into the steel. If an agent were captured with one, the weapon itself would tell the Gestapo nothing about where it came from. This lack of markings was a grim acknowledgement of the SOE's operating environment. An agent caught with such a device could expect no mercy, but the device itself would not betray the network. Despite the brilliance of the design, the sleeve gun exists in a strange historical limbo regarding its actual use. Production estimates suggest only about 150 to 200 units were ever made. A tiny fraction compared to the 2,800 well rods, or the millions of standard firearms produced during the war. The timing was the primary enemy of the sleeve gun. Manufacturing of the reliable Mark II variant likely did not begin in earnest until late 1944 or early 1945. By this time, the war in Europe was shifting from a clandestine insurgency to a massive conventional invasion. The need for subtle assassination was being overtaken by the brute force of armored divisions. The window for training agents and deploying them into the field with this specific device was rapidly closing. Consequently, there are no confirmed reports of the sleeve gun being used in action. Unlike the well rod, which has a rich operational history with documented kills by Danish and French resistance fighters, the sleeve gun appears in no memoirs, no post-action reports, and no citations for gallantry. It is a weapon that exists entirely in the realm of potential. However, the absence of evidence in the world of black operations is not always evidence of absence. The very nature of the weapon was to leave no trace. If a sleeve gun worked perfectly, there would be no report of a shooting, only a mysterious death attributed to a heart attack or a sudden collapse in a crowd. Yet, historical consensus leans toward the theory that it arrived simply too late to see the war it was built for. The comparison between the sleeve gun and its American counterparts highlights the sophistication of British engineering. At Station 9, the American OSS, formed later than the scrambled to create covert weapons, but often produced devices that were crude or fundamentally flawed. The OSS Stinger, a disposable pen gun, chambered in .22 short, was mass-produced but unreliable. It was prone to bursting in the hand, offered zero sound suppression, and was difficult to aim. The Sedgley Oss glove pistol was even more absurd, a heavy firearm mounted on a cowhide glove that required the user to punch the target. It was unsuppressed, meaning the user would deafen themselves and alert every guard within a mile, and the bulk of the weapon made it almost impossible to conceal under normal clothing. The famous FP45 Liberator, while ingenious in its logistics, was a psychological weapon rather than an assassination tool. A cheap, loud, single-shot pistol meant to create chaos, not to surgically remove a high-value target and vanish. Station 9's dominance in this field was due to the head start Britain had in the Secret War. Established in 1939, British covert labs had years to refine the chemistry of silence and the mechanics of concealment before the Americans even entered the conflict. The Germans, conversely, focused their immense engineering talent on battlefield dominance, tanks, rockets, and jet engines. The Gestapo and Abwehr relied on fear, surveillance, and conventional pistols like the Walther PPK. They seemingly never developed a dedicated, integral assassination system comparable to the sleeve gun. This reflects a fundamental difference in philosophy. The Nazi regime relied on the projection of overt power, while the British, fighting from an underdog position for much of the war, embraced the power of the invisible. The operational silence of the sleeve gun. The lack of combat records does not diminish its status as a masterpiece of design. It solved the mechanical and physical problems of assassination better than any other device of the 20th century. The suppression was on par with the best technology of the day. The caliber was sufficient for the task. The concealment and deployment mechanism was revolutionary. Douglas Everett's bar demonstration proved that the concept worked in the real world. Under the noses of unsuspecting witnesses, the weapon's obscurity is partly due to the rigorous destruction protocols of the SO. Agents were trained to destroy their equipment rather than let it fall into enemy hands. And at the end of the war, stockpiles of dirty weapons were often dumped into the sea or smelted down. Today, only 3 confirmed examples exist in museums. 2 in the Royal Armouries in Leeds, and 1 in the Norwegian Armed Forces Museum. They sit behind glass, silent witnesses to a war fought in the shadows. The legacy of the sleeve gun is also tied to the tragic fate of its inventor. Major Hugh Reeves survived the war, only to be killed by his own pursuit of engineering perfection. In 1955, while testing noise suppression technology for jet engines at an RAF base, he was accidentally drawn into the intake of a Hawker Hunter. The man who had spent his life mastering the science of silence died in a catastrophic roar of machinery. It was a cruel irony for a mind that had given so much to the quiet protection of his country, even without a kill list to its name. The sleeve gun had a strategic impact. The mere knowledge that British intelligence possessed such technology forced the German occupation forces to alter their behavior. When German security services captured Welrods or interrogated captured agents, they learned that the enemy could kill silently. This bred paranoia. High-ranking Nazi officials had to increase their guard details, limit their public appearances, and live in a constant state of anxiety. The threat of the invisible assassin disrupted the efficiency of the occupation government, forcing them to waste resources on protection and security sweeps. In this sense, the sleeve gun inflicted damage on the enemy simply by existing. In popular culture, the idea of a gun sliding out of a sleeve has become a trope of spy fiction, appearing in films and novels often attributed to the KGB or futuristic assassins. It is the ultimate cinematic device, the ace up the sleeve. But the reality is that this was not fiction. It was hard steel and rubber, designed by a mathematician in a manor house in Hertfordshire in 1943. The sleeve gun remains the most ingenious weapon of World War II that likely never fired a shot in anger. It stands as a testament to a specific moment in history when the desperation of total war forced engineers to think beyond the battlefield, creating devices that dissolved the line between a tool and a magic trick. It was 26 ounces of compressed murder that proved that British engineering could solve the impossible, even if history didn't give them the time to use it.